and I'm going to start now. You guys are good. You know me well. I get going into the meeting and I don't think about the recording, but I think I am now. Thanks, Jeremy. Very cool. Okay, so to demonstrate this, I really am kind of trying to just show I just kind of use this report. So here's another report idea for you. I've seen people use this to great effect. I've not always been the best at it, but make one page that has like a table of contents on it. You can drop these cool images on it with the buttons, and you can say what kind of shape that button is. One of them is a bookmark shape. So you can definitely import your own, but here right out of the box, they kind of had this idea that, oh, maybe we'll want to make this first page and then people can jump, you know, from these bookmarks to other places in the report. You select the bookmark, you set the action, say it's a page navigation action, and this is where we want to jump to. So first, we're just going to talk about using a different page for all your different measures and navigating to that page when you want to go there. So here's kind of our dashboard, what it looks like. Basically, I just wanted to show one big line chart. So right now we're looking at cumulative cases. I just refreshed it today, so through August. And here's the different measures. I chose 7 different measures we could look at. The cumulative cases, okay, then how many are currently active, which I think for the US, oh, that's right, I was only looking at Tennessee, that's right. I need to get the whole, there we go, 3.4 million active. How many were new just the day before? How many currently hospitalized? How many deaths so far? The positivity rates, I used a rolling 7 average on that, and kind of our daily deaths also with a rolling 7 average. So sorry, some of these are kind of morbid numbers, but you know, it's relevant and timely data here. So essentially what each of these does is these are cards on them, and in front of the card, I placed a little shape. So let me show each one here so you can see that. Like for the active, there's both the card that's showing the number, there's also a button on top of it, and on that button, you can set its action to navigate you to a different page, just like that. I also think with the fills, yes, there's a way you can set different states based on whether that is hovered over or pressed or disabled or default. So I think I've got it where by default, it has a transparency of 50%. So it kind of overlays this little, it's the nice thing about this, it makes it really clear about, hey, which page am I on? What am I looking at? But if you hover over it, it actually takes that transparency to 100%. So it becomes this nice kind of feel as you roll over it, like, oh, I know exactly where I'm going to jump. So if I click on another one of these measures, it actually navigates me to a different page. You'll see here at the bottom where I have all the other settings set, and I've got my chart with the new measure plugged into it. And this is sort of here's how we used to have to do it kind of way, right? That was when Power BI very first came out. This was just about the only option, even if you could get it to navigate where you wanted it to go. Let me share with you some pros and cons about this particular approach. I think most of you would kind of be familiar with how this works. It's kind of a traditional navigation type of thing. So one of the pros to this that you might not think about until you get into it is doing it this way. If you export this file to PowerPoint, all of those pages are going to export just like they show on the screen. So if you have a scenario where you really want to export a Power BI report into a file that comes, page by page, it's going to look pretty great as you export it. Your pages are independent of each other, which can be kind of nice in the sense of it's not terribly complicated. You're free to change the scale of one of these measures, or if you choose to, okay, maybe a different visualization type would be better. You're free to choose that on any page. Maybe there's a measure it's just a little different and I need to customize it. So you've got that option. And another pro to it is it's not too fancy. It's pretty straightforward, and it's kind of hard to mess it up. So that's a plus for sure. Yeah, basically I said it's obvious, right? People like obvious. But there's definitely some downsides. So some of those downsides are you have to wait. Every time you switch pages, you kind of have to wait for Power BI to render all of those pages over again. So you can kind of see that as that flash, right? And some of our other options, that doesn't become an issue. If the page is really heavy, that could be a bigger deal. This is the biggest one. There's just a lot more visuals to manage. That becomes a maintenance headache, depending on how many measures that you pick. So for myself, I know at several times when I was preparing this, I really kind of almost slapped myself because I was like, why did I do 7? I could have shown the same thing with 3. But I just want to illustrate that, yeah, I've got 7 pages worth of visuals, and on every one of them, I had to check the settings. So it was a lot of clicking around. Totally worth it if you think you're going to set it up one time and not mess with it that much. It's going to be dynamic. Oh man, it could really turn into a maintenance headache. A lot of copying and pasting, you know, that gets to be a pain. So changing it is difficult. So that's kind of the first option. And so it's just basically using traditional page navigation to show different things in different ways. So any questions about that? Because I never want to assume, even though, yeah, it's been around for a while, maybe you haven't seen buttons before, maybe you haven't seen the action options before. Anybody have any questions about that? I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat if I can find it. I'm doing the same thing that Alex was earlier. Here we go, 2 things in the chat. Are you recording? Great question. And a how-to document would be great. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. You know what? I think I might have written this up in a blog post, but I don't think I've published it yet, Tony. I'll show that. So
Brent, question for you. The selection pane there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you mentioned that or not, but how did you get that open?
Absolutely, super useful tool. It's under the view menu, and I think it appeared about December or January.
Okay, and what is that showing us?
Yeah, the selection pane it's really showing you all the visuals on the page. And thanks for asking, Jeremy. That's a good question. It's really showing you all your visuals on the page, and it makes it way easier both to get picked what you want, for one thing, so I can easily select my back button or my title shape. It also is showing the layer order, as they call it here. So it's anything that's higher up on the list is going to show up in front of the other things. Like with my buttons and my cards, it's important that the button is on top and the card is on bottom. So the button's what's actually being clicked, but the card is showing through the button. But it also gives you, if you haven't used this, this is a fantastic feature that definitely you'll want to start making use of, and it's just basically grouping. So for all of these, you know, since this is really 2 controls that I'm kind of using in composite, I'm going to show you how to do this. You can create a group out of any assortment of controls. In the selection pane, I think you can use control click. I think shift click might work if they're adjacent, just like the tabular editor. And then you click on these 3 dots and say group and group. Yeah, just group. And then it creates this group. It sticks it on top for you, which you don't always want, but you can double. Also it makes things way easier to rename. So if you've ever tried to mess with names before in Power BI, before you had to go click the control itself, then go change the title, probably turn the title on, then change it here and turn the title off. But with the selection pane, you don't have to do that anymore. So really, really nice. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so you achieved this by a combination of the selection pane and the bookmarks pane, correct? Can you show everybody that bookmarks pane as well?
Yes, I will. I'll actually get there on the next scenario. This one technically didn't use any bookmarks because each button just navigated to a page. So no bookmarks were needed for like scenario number 1 here. But we will definitely pull this up next. So I'm glad you said that. I'll go ahead and open it because it's there for sure. All right. Nice. So then that's a great segue actually into scenario number 2, which is using bookmarks. Right. And for the bookmarks, what we can do is really just keep it all on the same page. And what we're going to do is create many different visuals and toggle their visibility on and off, depending on what the user clicks. So this is a similar kind of bookmarks page. It's got the same buttons across the bottom, and it has just one big graph here at the top. What's going on behind the scenes that the user doesn't necessarily know or need to know is that on this page, there are actually a lot more charts. There's 7 charts to go with the 7 measures. So it looks like somebody's drawing on the screen. That's cool. So yeah, if I turn all these off, you can start to see them appear like behind this particular one I had turned on. So you can toggle their visibility on and off and you're like, okay, that's good, but then how do I like save that? Well, what you can do at that point is then create a bookmark. So bookmarks can capture the current page that's currently displayed. They can capture the current filters, and then they can capture whether, it says display, but it's essentially saying whether or not a control is visible, a visual is turned on to be visible. So yeah, using these little eyes to control the visibility is very helpful. For each of these bookmarks, what I had to do was get the visibility just like I wanted. Let's say I want my active chart visible, but not this one visible. Now it should shine through, there we go. And then create my bookmark. Typically what I end up having to do is create it and then, here I messed myself up, how funny. Create it and then go and update it again. That's how I like to do it anyway, because whenever I say create, I'm not sure everything's just exactly the way that I want it, you know. So again, I'm gonna I make sure that, okay, yeah, this one's visible because the eye isn't flashed out, and these others are invisible because the eye is flashed out. Okay, now a bookmark is basically like a snapshot, and I'm saying, go ahead and take a snapshot of my filters and what is displayed for all the visuals. And if I say update, basically it resets that snapshot. So I'm hoping now when I click the active bookmark, it takes me back to that active view. There we go. And so then I had to repeat that process 6 more times to get 7 bookmarks just the way I wanted them to. It's real hard to see what's going on the selection pane, but basically it's turning, it flashed this one over and it opened up that one. And so bookmarks are a great way to help, you know, control the state of your page. If you use bookmarks, but when I presented this for the Nashville group, they mentioned that, oh, one person was like, oh yeah, I've got like 50 bookmarks in every report I do. Because you can get a sub-selection of controls and say, okay, bookmark, I want you to only remember the state of this particular chart and not all visuals. So it can get, to me, it's not as intuitive as I would probably like it to be, but they are very powerful. So you can use them to jump around to other pages, turn things on and off, or change filters. So really, really helpful. Making sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. But here's where I wanted to go with this. The other nice thing about bookmarks is when you push them up to the Power BI service. Yeah, my bookmarks page was all messed up because I had this thing in the way. Excuse me while I delete this. And it's great, someone's mowing my yard right now, so I don't know if you could hear that. Sorry about that. The nice thing about bookmarks is that they really become, quote, first-class citizens in the Power BI service. So the service knows very well how to read those bookmarks and will display them to the consumer in the browser. They can click over here. I've got the new look on, so if you don't have that turned on yet, it's coming, but here's what it looks like in the new version. They can go over to bookmarks and say show more, and they get this little pane. And lo and behold, here's the same bookmarks listed out that I have defined on my page. So that's a nice thing about it. Like whatever I call them, you can make it very customized for your organization. So if it's Southern Division, it will say Southern Division. And then the user can simply click through these bookmarks, and it's just toggling visibility, showing those charts as needed. And you might notice too, it doesn't have to do a whole page refresh with lots of swirly, you know, and lots of reloading. It's pretty fast and crisp response. One downside to doing this, you might notice, is that while these things will hover, I didn't know how to change their transparency and capture that snapshot based on which bookmark I had selected. And someone told me in the meeting last time, they said, no, that's possible, but I did not know how to do that. So if you do know how to do that, please speak up and let me know. I'd love to know. So where if I was changing the default visibility of these different buttons, then it would, you know, be like highlighting the one I clicked on. So it's not quite as good of an experience as my navigation scenario was, but it is a nice experience for quickly flipping around visual. And I think, oh yeah, and then what I need to mention is that each of these buttons has an action on it, but instead of the action, and here I am within that group, I need to get the button selected. Instead of the action being a page navigation action, now the action is a bookmark type. So I'm saying, I don't want you to switch pages. I want you to go make this bookmark visible. And this one really should say total. I don't know why it doesn't. But each one, you know, had to set up each bookmark on each action. But definitely, again, the selection pane makes that easier than trying to get exactly clicked on exactly what I wanted, especially as things are overlying each other. Makes that much simpler. So pretty neat. And then that, while we're here, I need to show another feature, like a feature of bookmarks called personal bookmarks. So I have to kind of call this out as being different than personalized visual. But personal bookmarks have been around for quite a while. And what they allow the user to do is set some filters, change things on the page, and then I can take a snapshot. So if I was not the report author, if I'm just a user, but let's say as that user, I'm from Oklahoma, so maybe I really only just want to see this report for Oklahoma. And, you know, I don't really care about seeing it other ways. Then, now it's interesting, I did that. I probably should have unchecked the current data in my bookmarks, so it would have helped me out. But anyway, if I have a view that I like and I want to keep it this way, then I can go in here, the personal bookmarks, and say add. All right, just Oklahoma. I can even say make this the default view, which is pretty neat. So just like the report bookmarks, which come along with the report, I can now have my own personal bookmarks. Let's say I started with several things showing. Now I can say just okay, and it will take me back to just having Oklahoma selected. Well, it should have anyway. And maybe I did that wrong. Let's see. I might need to filter it here at the state level, but I thought it would have remembered those state. Anyway, I thought I would have remembered my state selection. I'm not as good with bookmarks as I want to be, apparently. I just know you can create personal bookmarks about, you know, and so basically then the user, every time they pull up the report, they can see just what they want to see, which is cool. Okay, bookmarks are kind of a deep topic, but really a helpful tool. Any questions on bookmarks before we go on to personalized visuals? Cool. All right. Very nice. Okay, option 3, personalized visuals. So personalized visuals, different from personal bookmarks, is a new feature in Power BI that, in preview only, by the way, that allows users to change the chart that's being displayed and even the fields in the chart. It's pretty amazing. But before we go on to that, I just realized I have pros and cons for all these options. Let's think about pros and cons for bookmarks. One, a pro, bookmarks, like I said, are first-class citizens in the Power BI service. So if you use them, you kind of get this awesome built-in navigation that's already there. Second pro to it, it's all on one page. I didn't have to manage 7 pages anymore, just down to 1. Some cons that I wrote down, not every property can be captured by a bookmark, as far as I know. Managing bookmarks can be confusing, I think. And then also just regression testing them. So they take a snapshot of the current state of the page, but if I go and delete 3 visuals and add 4 more, as far as what I believe happens is the bookmark's completely unaware of the 4 new visuals. You know, like making sure they still work after I've made a lot of changes. That's what I call regression testing. Can be tricky. You end up kind of like, okay, let me click on all of them again, just make sure they look good. But again, very great way to customize and create a much more app-like experience on your report. So when we talk about personalized visuals, first thing I need to mention is it's a preview feature. So similar to what Alex had to do during his presentation, if you'd like to use this, you actually have to turn it on in Power BI Desktop. I'm using the August version here, and I believe this became available maybe as late as the June one, but it might have been July. But in one of those releases, you'll see under options and settings, we go to options, and there's this lovely thing over here that has to do with preview features. I would be, anytime you update Power BI, go back and check this out again, because this will change every time you get a new update. But we have to make sure that personalized visuals is checked. And so once it is checked, it will ask you, do you want to restart? You have to restart Power BI. Are you ready to do that? Okay, yeah, I'm ready to. So I've already done that in my case. But once you do that, what you do in Power BI Desktop is kind of shockingly simple. It's hidden, but it's simple. You get the control selected that you want to allow the user to personalize. So I have my chart. On my personalized visual, I've actually I've got a couple of other charts, but I only need one. And under the format, which is the paint roller, you get a lot of options here, but you got to check under visual header, and which has a lot within it. You scroll all the way to the bottom. So much going on in this particular pane. And very, very last one is personalized visual. So you might, on different resolutions, I found it where maybe I thought options were missing that I knew ought to be there, and it just was a scrolling thing. So always kind of check that when you're looking for these options. It could just be that you have a scroll bar within a scroll bar, even within a third one. So it's all the way here at the bottom. So if I want the user to be able to personalize this, I just toggle this button on. And nothing really changes as far as I can tell inside of Power BI Desktop. I guess there is a little icon here that vanished. I'll turn it back on to show that. Right there, yeah, this one appeared now, and it says this visual can be personalized by report readers. If I click on it in Power BI Desktop, nothing really happens, because this feature is all about what happens in the browser. When a consumer comes and looks at this report, they'll then see that same little option. It says, instead it says personalize this visual. I can click on this, and here's the pane that I get. It's kind of amazing. I can change my visualization type. And if I want to change that, I can choose from any available visual in the report. I can change what's on the axis if I want to, which is amazing. You know, you're giving them a lot of power to really customize and or mess things up as they want to. I can add things to my legend. So I could make a state legend here and see how that goes. It's going to split this up maybe 50 different ways, I hope. Yeah. And whatever changes that they're making at this level, this isn't really editing the report. This is just changing really at a browser level the visual that's going to be displayed only for this particular user. So this is cool. So I've kind of taken this chart that the report developer thought up, and without having to edit the report and maybe feel like, well, I don't want to mess with the data set at all, I create something that I know only affects me. Now, what happens if I leave this page? I'll just hit refresh. If I leave that page and I come back to it, do I still see my personalized visual or not? Let's see. I do not. It basically went away. In order to persist that personalized visual, they need to create a personal bookmark. So that's the secret sauce, and that's why the personal bookmarks were important earlier. Now, if I split things up by state, I get my bookmarks pane back, and here I am again. I'm in the browser here. I'm not in Power BI Desktop. I'm going to add another personal bookmark, and this one's going to be by state. Now I can make that the default view. Now let's see if I did this one right. I hope so. And that one didn't work right. I'd have to investigate why. But this did. It remembered my visualization personalization. That sounded a lot like Dalmatian plantation when I said it out loud. But I mean, the possibilities are great, both for flexibility to your users and also for confusion in three people looking at the same report and seeing completely different charts and information. But someone suggested that one of the most useful features of this, and I totally agree with them, is to they can change these charts into tables. So there's always been the ability to kind of export the underlying data or see the table, view as table, but it wasn't always as helpful as you wanted it to be. If I can flip this over into a table visualization, and this is clearly what I had going on earlier on this report, I can then, some people just want to see it this way, and then some people want to export it. If I have a lot of tooltips, pieces of information in the tooltip, they'll come through as columns. So you can allow people to kind of create their own, tables out of things. So I could really see people using this feature. But for myself, I'm kind of torn about, how far do I use the personalized visual feature? Knowing that it's preview, I've got to turn it on in every report I create. And then I've got to turn it on for every visual, which is probably a good idea that it's not on by default. I almost wouldn't want to display it without some kind of text next to it that says, hey, you can personalize this visual if you want to. Make sure to create a personal bookmark if you put a lot of work into it. And also just kind of do so at your own risk, right? Because they could basically make it wrong if they wanted to. Definitely a preview feature that should, but very interesting, hopefully. So since this is new, I definitely want to pause here and just ask any questions about how personalized visuals work or ideas about have you used it? I'm curious to hear too. It's in the Power BI service. I mean, it'll be supported in the service. You just have to turn it on in desktop.
So one of the things, and this is where you're at right now, Brent, is perfect. One of the things that I was wondering about is, can we filter down the available columns and measures for them to, so they're not looking at everything that's in the model, just what they might be interested in possibly trying to personalize?
That's a great question, and I don't know that you can. I wish I knew the answer to that, but man, the settings are so simple. Sorry, I say man, because I know you, Jeremy. Sorry. The only setting here is just to flip this toggle on and off, and I don't know that there's much more to it. But I think that might be a good idea, especially maybe if you could create a couple of suggestions for them or something, or say, hey, you can turn your line chart into a column chart, but not into a pie chart, right? But it seems like it's pretty wide open. I suppose you could do that by hiding visuals, unpinning visuals from the pane, but then you're also limiting yourself.
So Billy asks, does the personalized view extend to other users that are looking at the page at the same time?
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And the good question, and the answer is no. I think that the personalized visual is actually like a browser cookie, essentially. I think there's some kind of local storage. I'm old, so I'm saying cookies, but there's some kind of local storage in the browser that is remembering, hey, when I render this page, if I have this setting set, I'm going to render it this way with this visual. So no, Billy, other people won't see it. And the only way, I don't know if I can share a personal bookmark. I might be able to clear default, rename, delete. Not really. I do think if I have a personal bookmark picked, then I can share. If I share my dashboard, that it will share that with other people, but I'll confirm that for sure, whether or not that's true. Yeah, it looks like it went away because I changed the personalized visual information I wanted. Oh, hey, Tony. Recommended person. Yeah, Tony's saying if you could give recommended personalized visualizations, that will be a better end user experience. And yeah, I definitely tend to agree. It's kind of wide open. It's kind of like, here, consumer, develop your own report a little bit. Okay, very good. Thanks for the feedback. I really appreciate it. Okay, with our or use Q&A, and that's a good point. If users want to drill into it a little bit, yeah, use that Q&A. Good question. So with my time left, I'll just show you how to do this dynamic. Well, no, I'm sorry. First, I'm going to talk about pros and cons. At least pros and cons that I know of so far from having used this, having used this personalized visual for all of a month now. Pro, it was really easy for me to turn on as a report developer. I just toggled the button and I said, hey, you're welcome, customer. And it does give a lot more flexibility for my audience. If you're making a report and you've got the CFO wants it one way and the COO wants it another way, maybe just turn on personalized visuals. Like, y'all just make it the way you want it. But I wrote more cons, like it shifts the burden a little bit to the consumer, which I usually don't like to do very much. It makes them work, it makes them think. You can't control everything, so you can't really control the format panel, just the data field. It's a preview feature, could change, could go away. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of change in this particular feature before it GAs. You have to train people how to do that, so that's a whole new pain that wasn't there before, exactly where to click. And if you've got them used to editing and saving their own version of the report that goes off of the data set, do you want to train them on, oh yeah, and you have this kind of third option or fourth option? Sometimes it's too much. And I mentioned it won't work with all visuals, but I think that's actually not true. I've found it will work with custom visuals and things like that. So any visual in the report. Okay, so last one, same page, and actually just using one measure that is a dynamic measure. So you've probably seen this illustrated before, but we can create one measure that will show different numbers based on what we select. So the way I kind of implemented this was, first I had to create a real simple table called measure slice. And this measure slice, it uses a pattern. This is a pattern that you've probably come across called disconnected slicers. And they call it disconnected because this table really stands on its own, as it is just here to power a slicer and let the user pick one of these options. And then I'm going to use DAX to figure out which option they picked. So this measure slice table has in it my 7 choices, basically. That's all it has. I might have done this either by having a simple spreadsheet, or I might have used the enter data feature in the transform ribbon. But here are my 7 options. And I put a number in front of them so they would alphabetize the same way. That simple table is powering this is actually a chiclet slicer, which is a cool custom visual that I use quite a bit, and emulates the way Excel does their slicers, basically. Okay, so now I know I can show 7 options, and I can let the user pick one. That's good. How do I make use of that? It all happens in a measure that I called dynamic measure. There you go, it's inside of here. So let's look at the DAX for dynamic measure. And if you're not used to reading DAX, clearly I'm gonna have to blow that up. That is way too small. Then don't worry, we'll make it good. There we go. All right, dynamic measure uses some DAX. The first thing that it does, it has a variable declaration that we're gonna figure out, okay, of my measure slice table, which row got picked? So there's a really nice formula called selected value that it does this syntax of saying, if they only have one value picked, give it to me. If not, give me some other default value. And so I'm saying, give me the one that they picked. If not, just give me the word active back. which actually I really should change that definition to say to-active, but I'm just giving myself a default. Okay, if they haven't picked any particular one, I'm gonna give them a default. And then there's this nice little switch statement. So a switch statement is like a long if statement, and it will return either the first thing that matches this first argument. Another really common pattern is I can provide the word true for this first argument. So I can say, just give me the first expression as you go down your list that is true. So essentially it's saying if the selected measure is active, then I'm going to show them this measure that I just called active. If they pick this value, then I'm going to show them the new cases since the prior day. And it goes on down the list until it reaches this very last one as a default. So then if it didn't match any of the other first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 options, just give me this one. This gives you a lot of power, as you could see. So you can just make your visual tied to one measure, but then make the results of that measure dynamic based on what they picked. So that's what it's doing. And what's cool about that is as they pick different things, sure enough, my measure is going to recalculate and it's going to return some different results, which is kind of what we wanted. I definitely have seen other people use this pattern really, really well. Some downsides to it are you have to write DAX. So if you really don't feel comfortable in that world, that can be kind of like, I don't like to get in there. But it is a pretty well documented pattern you can find on the internet. Some other downsides, you might notice that I'm not really changing the color as I pick different things. I actually think with this month's version of the release, I might be able to do that. That wasn't an option like in July. Yeah, I'm still looking for an FX right here. If I see an FX button, and maybe it's a preview feature I need to turn on, but then maybe I could say, okay, now I can make a dynamic expression to change the color of this thing that matches kind of my color pattern so far. But if not, if I'm happy with one color, then that's okay. But yeah, there's a lot of pros to it too. You maintain most of your customization in code and not in tons and tons of clicking settings on visuals and all kinds of stuff like that. It doesn't rely on bookmarks. And yeah, it's all on one page again, right? So those are 4 options. Hopefully it kind of covers a range of features. Maybe there's one in there you didn't know about. And that's pretty close to the end of my time. But any comments or questions about anything we covered in this presentation?